So Patrick Bet-David, founder of Valuetainment, friend of the channel, great guy. I had an opportunity to sit with him and spend some time talking a couple of years ago. Had a recent video that launched. I want to unpack that with you today. He talked a little bit about the difference between a market crash versus a recession, talked about why recessions are actually good, can be good. They're important, to say the least. Talked about the preparation that is necessary when facing a potential recession like we are, and also talked about how you can even make millions during that type of economic downturn. There's tremendous opportunity involved with it, and I'd like to walk through some of what he was going over, share some of our thoughts and experiences. Perhaps there will be some incredible takeaways. If any of you haven't seen the video yet, we'll leave a link in the description for you as well, so you can make sure to check that out. Also, make sure you download the PowerPoint that he provides too. It's a great wealth of information. The guy is really a thought leader and has made some tremendous headway in this space, and an influencer we certainly look up to. So let's talk about where he sort of kicks things off in this video. He mentions adding a zero to your bottom line, right? So if you have $100 in the bank, you should be targeting at least 10xing that to 1,000, from 1,000 adding to a 10K or even 100K net worth, and working your way up. I know in his experience, we've seen him grow in just the short time we've known him, from a millionaire status to a decamillionaire, and now even a 100-millionaire. Guy is really making waves, and that was because there has been a humongous a collection of ways of going about creating wealth over the past 15 years since the last Great Recession, and these cycles tend to happen about once every decade. And I'm curious what your thoughts were when you first heard that, about really trying to level yourself up and adding that extra zero to your net worth. How does that fit inside your business and investment philosophy?
Yeah, and I love his videos. Obviously, I'm a follower of his channel. I really subscribe to that. Not necessarily the adding a zero, and I really liked how he described that. He's just so matter of fact in his approach. So I love that it's just, it simplifies it. Just add a zero to your net worth. I'm always trying to move the needle. I'm always anticipating making more next year than I am this year, and obviously this year more than I did the previous year. So whether that means adding a zero or whatever the case may be, I'm always trying to go on an upward trajectory. When it comes to times like now, where there's some distressed times and there's that kind of uncertainty, that's when I see blood in the streets. I mean, honestly, I do. After the last market crash, in 08, after that, I was hungry. I was out there making a lot of moves. A lot of our colleagues were, yourself included. The people that are really making moves in times of uncertainty or distress like that are the ones that ultimately come out, with a lot of wealth. I plan on being one of them. So I love Patrick Bet-David starting or saying that to folks. If you're watching and you don't have that already implemented, or that kind of mindset, develop it. Right now is the time where generational wealth can be built, because there's so many people that are just going to be sitting on their hands. So I love that he said that. I subscribe to it, absolutely. How about you? I mean, I know that you're always trying to move the needle.
No question. And you mentioned earnings, and perhaps that's where he was really intending for that to contextually line up. But I personally am always going to be promoting and shouting from the mountaintop. It boils down to the cash flow side. I do want to come back a bit down the road to some of our personal experiences after the downturn during the pandemic, because I got hit really hard during that time in one of my businesses. For me to see a $65,000 reduction of earnings in just a 6-week period from that March 15th sort of doomsday start period of the COVID shutdowns, that was a dramatic hit for me in small business, and it required a lot of changes to be made, I guess you could say, and I want to get back into those as we move forward. But and I know Patrick mentions in this video, really isn't as much about what you're earning. It's more about how much you're keeping and what you're doing with it. You do have to focus on that net cash flow number in order to determine safety. If you add an extra zero, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wealthier. And for many years in business, I would earn more and more, but because of the necessary overhead in order to develop that growth, whether it be personnel or whether it be technology or whether it be infrastructure and office space or travel costs, we were negatively cash flowing. And there was a point where we had even experienced a $600,000 amount of business related debts in order to build the business to where we eventually got it. So it's incredibly important that we focus during these tumultuous or precarious times on preserving as much of what we're earning as we can. So I guess that would be my response to you as far as my personal approach. I think it's very cash flow oriented. Big surprise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I could actually relate it to a business now that you're talking about that years ago. And this would have been after '08. And it was not a real estate related business. It was a kind of a production company, services company. And when we were going through all of that, it was like, how do you fix this? Let's generate sales. Sales fixes everything. Well, it doesn't, right? So we had the opportunity to have clients that were, willing to give us their business. And some of them were $1 million monthly accounts, so a $10 or $12 million account, annualized for our business, which would have been great. But the terms and the margins were so razor thin that it would either break even or, even a potential loss. So yeah, we were adding zeros to the bottom line, but we were obviously not adding the right types of zeros. So you have to be cognizant as well. Growth the right way, sales that have the right amount of profit margin. So obviously all of those things have to be considered.
So Patrick thinks that the crash is coming within the next 6 to 24 months. He makes that very clear. And that falls fairly close to the timeline that we had anticipated back in our original videos. Possibly, things were pretty nice and people were still doing quite well for quite a while, beyond when I thought maybe we should. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he's obviously indicating that recessions are a good thing. Do you agree that Patrick, with Patrick, that there are situations where a recession can actually be a good thing?
Yeah, I do actually. And I've thought about that often. I'm always trying to find kind of a silver lining. I mean, there's always going to be highs and lows in the economy. Every market's going to have, ebbs and flows with that as well. So I'm always going to be trying to analyze, regardless of market conditions, how can I capitalize it? How can I make money on it? I do think a recession's coming. How bad is obviously the question that remains unseen. Anytime historically where there's been 2 interest rate hikes in the same quarter, there's been a 60% or better chance of going into recession within the next 18 months. That's happened. So all of the tea leaves that we're reading right now we're going in that direction. It's just going to be, is it going to be mild or is it going to be severe? I think that recession is going to be good for really kind of a handful of reasons. I think that we learned during the housing bust, we've learned during the .com bust, obviously, that a misallocation of investment funds into the economy, like fueling a housing bubble or a .com bubble, driving these asset prices down. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for investors that are out there that are willing to look at the long-term plays, the long dollars. We did videos recently on the crypto. They're still buying it on the way down. So I think that recessions can, kind of correct that. There's been so much money going into an inflated housing market, just like there was in, 2000 when there was so much money and interest going into the .coms, and then that busted. And then obviously people that were still alive, still afloat, were able to invest or getting deals at discounts. So I think from an investor standpoint, it makes a ton of, there's a ton of merit to it. It's exciting for investors. From a consumer standpoint, obviously there's some negative drawbacks to it, but from an investor standpoint, a recession is actually really good for my business.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to that too, with respect to how do you best prepare then, right? Because not everybody will have their ducks in a row, and not everybody for that reason will be able to take advantage of the many opportunities that will be on sale. He actually thinks it's the best time to build wealth. Do you agree?
I think it's a great one. You know, I wouldn't necessarily say the best. I think that any market has the ability to have money be made in it. I think that it's going to obviously create less competition. So me as an investor going out there, not having to compete with 100 other investors, maybe I'm only competing with 20 now because the other 80 are sitting on the sidelines, sitting on their hands, waiting to see what happens with the market, when the correction is going to ultimately happen, if it's going to hit a rock bottom. So the competition being thinned out certainly is going to help me. I think that just businesses in general, I think, can benefit from a recession. I think that they're going to get lean during the recession. They're going to be cutting overhead. They're maybe going to be cutting staff. And I've gone through multiples of really recessions. This will be really my third in business. So I had the .com, I had the housing bust, obviously the pandemic, and then this one that we're working our way into right now. We've always cut costs. We've always stayed lean and mean and come out really stronger on the other end because we don't have that waste on the books anymore. So that's a great advantage. And then also balances out everyday costs. So, just like when employment is really high, costs are going to be really high along with it. When unemployment is high, that's going to force, prices to ultimately come down. So people with like a fixed income, for example, the corrections on consumer goods is certainly going to benefit them. So if you look at it through a couple different lenses, whether it's an investor or business standpoint or a consumer lens, those would be some of the benefits just kind of off the cuff.
So it's not just Patrick Bet-David that's talking about this recession. In fact, inside his presentation, he echoed a number of other people, well-respected, who are concerned about the upcoming recession. Let's go ahead and get a couple of those opinions out and get some of your thoughts about it. We've got Elon Musk starting off by responding to a question on Twitter. Do you think we're approaching a recession? Elon goes on to say, yes, but this is actually a good thing. It's been raining money on fools for too long. Some bankruptcies need to happen. He actually says further, also, all the COVID stay-at-home stuff has tricked people into thinking that you don't actually need to work hard. Rude awakening inbound. Let's go ahead and pick that one apart quickly, because it's not too hard to see that people have possibly gotten comfortable living a new approach to their professional lives. It's possibly brought on a little bit of laziness. People may not be putting in the time, the effort, the hours, the focus that's really required to stand out and to overcome what is coming down the road. And I think it needs to be reinforced. Patrick did a phenomenal job of emphasizing the fact that if you're not willing to put in the work, you're probably going to be left behind. We know that the middle class is slowly going away. It's not even that slowly. It's fairly rapid. So you're going to end up on one side of the spectrum or the other. If you're sitting there thinking that you can put in a mediocre amount of effort and time and energy into building a roadmap for yourself and still come out ahead, then you better pray you're a lucky person. That's going to be only the anomalies that are able to pull that off. It's time to buckle down. And I think the message I took away from this presentation from Patrick is the time of sitting back and being complacent is past. You don't have a choice at this point, and it can get pretty ugly. So this is not just for wealth creation reasons. This is for preservation reasons. This is to make sure that your household doesn't end up in the streets. There will be people who lose their homes and have absolutely no money or anywhere to live. So we want to make sure that we can not just survive through this, but also talk about ways that we can thrive too. Any ideas behind what Elon was saying there?
Yeah, a couple. So as you just said right there, in order to really survive, I think that if you're looking at this and people are watching and they're a W-2 wage earner, I think job security right now is going to be at the forefront of everyone's mind. So like he said on his video, make yourself irreplaceable. Make yourself so valuable to the company that even if they're going through layoffs and kind of those rollbacks and cutbacks, they can't afford to get rid of you, because those layoffs are going to start happening now. So I think the lazy are going to get filtered out. I'm happy about that, right? So I don't have anything in common with lazy people, so I can't really feel too sorry for them. But those people just kind of washing themselves out, and again, removing that competition, that's music to my ears. You know, people that have been in that position are no longer going to be able to float. I love that quote by Musk. I own multiple companies, and we have done, you know, kind of a hybrid, you know, since the pandemic started, of kind of that remote working and on-site working and kind of everything in between. I think just like every company, it's kind of had to experiment and kind of pivot with that. But laziness from the outset was always the concern. So what we did, you know, really was put measures in place and really performance metrics in place. Incentives, though, not, I always use the carrot, not the stick. If you look at that analogy, always incentivize employees as opposed to punish them. So they're going to go after that reward more often than they're going to try to avoid a punishment. So that's kind of the psychology that we prescribe to. That being said, though, we do put metrics in place. So we want to track to see if they're, you know, better performers in the office, and undoubtedly they were. You know, that's what our data proved out. So we did ultimately work into a hybrid role. So I think a lot of businesses have been experiencing that. They've been beholden to employees. I mean, look how many help wanted signs you see in any city USA. Those days are going to start slowing down some more. So I think I know employers, me as one of them, are going to start having more leverage over employees, not necessarily bad leverage, but just accountability. You know, the concern that they're just going to run to the next, you know, firm because they had to work an extra hour. Those days are long gone. So people are going to have to adjust that mindset. So wholeheartedly agree with that.
You're right. And I think it boils down to, when you're dealing with business owners who don't have much choice, as I'd mentioned, a $65,000 per month downtick in our earnings in just the first 6 weeks of the pandemic required for that specific business model to be overhauled. And while it's never fun, and while we really treat our team as family, and we've truly grown to love and care about them and their families, we had no choice but to pivot as quickly as possible. Agility was key, as it is with all businesses who want to survive when things are volatile. So I ended up having to scale back, and only the best of the team was really there following that scale back. You have to be the one that stands out. It was funny because I actually uncovered a couple of situations where even these folks that I had worked with for many, many years, over a decade, we saw that there was even laziness running rampant inside our business. And shame on me for not having all of the exact supervision and tracking metrics in place for prevention of that in this specific situation, because I am a data-oriented person. I do want to own responsibility for that. However, it was a bit revealing that because the oversight hadn't been there, somebody was willing to take advantage of what appeared to be a lot of free time. And this person not only had a lot of free time, but much like yourself, I want to treat my staff and my team with the highest level of upside opportunity as I can. I want to reward them for great performance. And a lot of that includes an ownership interest in the business. And this individual was a 5% owner of the company, and yet still didn't proactively come back during each and every weekly meeting while reviewing the bullet points from the previous week and plans for the future week, and mentioned, look, I'm concerned about not having enough tasks to keep me busy during the day. And here we were thinking there's plenty being done, when in fact, once we ended up analyzing who we were going to cut, it became disappointingly obvious that this person not only wasn't worth the position, but probably should have been let go quite a bit earlier. And I think a lot of that had to do with the freedom of being able to work from home. A lot of these things are a privilege. This is a privilege that we had actually awarded our team long before the pandemic. This was something that we had done once our 7-year lease on an office space came to an end, we began revisiting the necessity behind this and decided this would actually be a privilege. They'll work harder. Had some conversations with some higher ups at Netflix who said, we allow our team to work from home. It works really well. They appreciate it. They work more because they don't have commutes and don't have to worry about dry cleaning suits and so forth. So a lot of it made sense to me, but here I was sort of regretting that decision to some extent as a business owner. And of course, during that cutting process, an analysis was done of who is really performing. An analysis was done of who is really performing. And here we are. You have to make yourself as valuable as possible. If you're a business owner, you know your business has to provide as much value as it can. But if you're working for somebody else in a 9 to 5, an 8 to 4 or 10 to 6, you've got to be there working diligently and perhaps even putting on your creative thinking cap to where you start to evaluate where you might be able to even enhance your value beyond what the expectation of you is. And if you're exceeding those expectations and it comes time for these cuts to be made, the moment your name comes up, people are going to say, absolutely not. We can't afford to lose them. So yeah. I think that's a terrific point.
Yeah, and just kind of dovetailing off that in that same vein, making yourself, being the innovator, becoming the idea guy, the go-to guy, make yourself so valuable. It's undoubtedly happening. And, you're proof right there in your business when you guys did that kind of autopsy on your company. It was about remote working at the time, but it could be, during a recession when business owners are taking a look under the hood and they're trying to make those cuts and seeing where they can kind of trim that fat. When you're under the spotlight, and I forget who said the quote, I think it was Warren Buffett. In fact, it was Warren Buffett. He said, when the tide goes out, you can see who's wearing pants. So it's kind of that same deal where you're doing that kind of autopsy on your business and you can see where to make cuts. If there's a glaring weakness right there, who do you think is going to get cut first? So like you said, make yourself as valuable as you can, as quickly as you can, because those days are coming soon.